WATD presents John Paul, the Car Doctor. All things automotive. Have questions? Call 781-837-4900. Now, here's John Paul, the Car Doctor.
And good Sunday morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Car Doctor program on 95.9 WATD. We are supposed to be talking with Brian Lohnes. Brian Lohnes is he works for Fox Sports. He announces for the NHRA. I talked to him earlier in the week. He said he was going to call in, and I'm sure he will be calling in because I just texted him and said he could call in any time. So that's the plan for today. Also, we have a text line. We'll have to give that a shot in a little bit too to see how that works. So if you if you don't want to be on the air but you have a question, you can text in and Jesse will read it and he'll tell me what it is and he'll make stuff up on the way. So we got those things going on. I get products to try out once in a while, and if you've wondered why I haven't been reviewing any cars lately, it's because I'm, not in New England, and there's a different company that I deal with down here, and they've been really busy, and they've been short on cars, but they're going to try to start to take care of me as they get caught up with some stuff. They were, they had to deliver some cars to Daytona for courtesy vehicles out there for racing. They've been pretty busy. Also, again, the 2014s are a little short supply right now, so there's been that issue. But hopefully that will be straightening itself out before too long. So I've been looking at all kinds of different products and things, and sometimes it's a flashlight. Sometimes it's a interesting knife. I got one from a company that it's a sort of looks like a multi-tool, but it's a little bit limited. Depending on what you want to do. It is a knife, which is handy. I'm surprised how often I use a knife opening up boxes and taking stuff out of packages and whatever. But it also has a screwdriver, both Phillips and regular, and it takes regular size bits so you can swap them out and put different ones in. But what's nice about it is the handle locks at a 90-degree angle, so you get a little bit more leverage, which is kind of nice. So that works out good. And then the other aspect of it has a bottle opener, which if you drink something that's in a bottle that doesn't twist off, having a bottle opener is handy to have with you. So you get a knife, Phillips, and flat screwdriver, and a bottle opener. I suppose maybe that's all the tools you need. And it's pretty handy. But I got something from a company, and I don't know if I am pronouncing this correctly, but I'm calling it No Nasty, and it's NONASTE with the umlaut or something over the E. I don't know what that. Jesse, how's your English language? Is a flat line over an E and umlaut, or is that something else?
I think you got it. I think that's the name of it.
I don't know. Well, anyway. And one of the products they sent me was this spray cleaner, and it's an odor eliminator, and it's one of those things that I get a lot of calls about from people or not people but emails, I guess, and they're always trying to figure out, my dog was in the car, or I just bought a used car and the person's a smoker, and what can I do? Is there something I can do? And this stuff works pretty good. I used it and their thing is you get sweat out, but you can use it in all kinds of stuff. Pair of sneakers I sprayed it in. It seemed to make a difference with that. This product seems to work pretty well. But the other thing they sent me is a car seat protector. And it isn't like a traditional seat cover. It is a kind of a they called it sealskin, but I think that's just a term they use. And it just sort of fits over the headrest and lays flat on the seat. And I didn't have any real use for it, but I gave it to my next door neighbor who He hunts, he fishes, and he dives. So I said to him, try this. Oh, see how it does. And he goes, I love this thing. He said, it works out great. He said, I put it in the car. I sit on it. My seats don't get wet and dirty, especially if I've been diving. You can only dry off so much after diving. And he said, the other thing is when I've been out hunting, I'm on my hands and knees sometimes, crawling through little tunnels and things. And he said, it's really nice for keeping the car clean. I just take it home and hose it off and hang it up, let it dry out, fold it back up and stick it back in the car. So if you have, those needs from stuff, give it a shot. The next one I'm going to talk about coming up pretty soon is a battery tester. We'll get to that in a bit. But right now, let's talk to Tom from Kingston. Tom?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing okay. We're waiting for a big snowstorm they're predicting for Tuesday.
I've been reading all about it. It's going to be like all snowstorms in Massachusetts. It's going to be from 0 to 12 inches.
That's right, and they're probably accurate.
We'll go with that. Sure.
Sure. Yeah, I got a couple things going on. First thing is I got a check engine light. I have a new to me 2019 Toyota Senna.
Okay.
And the check engine light came on. And I thought they had a product that you can buy at the local auto store that helps to clean or do something to the exhaust system so that the check engine light goes out. Any news on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that you can get at the parts store.
Okay.
All kinds of stuff you can get at the parts store that cleans out the catalytic converter, the check engine light goes out.
And does it work?
No.
Thank you.
It depends what's really wrong with it. And this is, how many miles are on it? You said it's a 2019?
2019, it has 120,000.
Okay, but still. Unusual that you would have a bad catalytic converter. Have you checked for codes yet?
Nothing yet. I'm going to this week.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd check for codes and see what you come up with. I mean, it could be as goofy as, the gas cap is bad.
Gas cap, right.
Yeah. Or it could be, kind of characteristic of Toyota products is there's a thing called a purge valve. They sometimes can go bad. And basically the car will run perfect, no problems at all, but it'll say slight evap leak, and it's usually a purge valve on a Toyota. And not a terrible repair, but you won't notice it other than the light will be on. And I assume, how long ago did you get this?
We got this probably about a month ago.
About a month ago, and you had it inspected when you got it?
Yes.
So it went right
there
through
was
with
no light on at that time. And the person we purchased it from said, check engine light comes on every once in a while, bought it to the dealer. He says, don't worry about it.
Yeah, that sounds like it's probably a purge valve.
Okay.
It's probably that would be my guess. And especially, I mean, odd that the dealer would say don't worry about it, but as usually,
is purge valve expensive?
No, not. Everything's expensive, I guess. But no.
Okay.
It is. It's maybe a half an hour labor to replace it. It may be on this. It may be part of the vapor canister, which which makes it more expensive, the part wise. But it's one of those things that I don't know, the part if you bought it from Toyota is probably $300 or $400. What scares me right now is labor rates that I'm seeing in some garages, not so much in out down on the South Shore, but I've been seeing some labor rates at $265 an hour at dealerships.
It's funny you say that. I asked my brother-in-law who works at the Mercedes place over there in Route 1.
Yep.
He's the mechanic over there. I said, well, how is the shop rates? He goes, $200 an hour.
Yeah.
It's like my doctor doesn't charge that.
It seems to be getting out of control, and it's funny. I was just casually talking to someone the other day who used to be the service manager at the BMW dealership, kind of across from where the Mercedes dealership is,
oh, yeah.
and he was saying, I said something. He said, a lot of people think BMWs are expensive, and I said, I said something about the labor rate, and he goes, well, anybody that has one of those should have an extended service contract because they are expensive. But the idea that $200 an hour, and that to me just sounds at
even
some
if it only takes them 15 mintes to fix it.
Well, yeah, and it's going to be a minimum of an hour, no matter what. Yeah,
correct.
So,
Yeah.
that's the price of cars is scaring me. The price of labor to fix them is scaring me more. And it's sort of the one weird thing that doesn't make any sense. And I guess it does if you know the business, is body shop labor that insurance companies pay for. And body shops bill insurance companies still something like $35 an hour.
Still, huh?
And the only reason they can get away with it, I guess, is because everybody must be taking advantage of everybody. The body shop says, this is going to be a 5-hour job, and it's $35 an hour, but we're going to, the parts are going to be this, and it's really a 2-hour job, but we're going to charge $3. It's the they're going to pay a good body shop guy $40 an hour. So how can they charge an insurance company $30? And part of it is the steady money from the insurance, but still, it's that makes no sense when you hear $200, $240, $265 an hour labor. Some independent shops are still $120, $125 or so. So
right, which is reasonable.
Yeah.
The other thing I have is auto insurance. I had a 2002 Chevy van, full-size van.
Yep.
And my car insurance from Allstate was close to $500. It was like $480, $490 for the year. And you don't have too much coverage on it when you have, other than the liability, personal property, $100,000. And
yep.
I have $100. No, it was a $250, $500 on the other stuff. Well, I went up to the 219 Toyota.
Yep.
It went from $480, $490 a year to almost $1,500.
Yeesh.
So, and I said, well, that's a big jump, another $1,000 up. So I say, I'll call a couple other insurance companies, get a price, see what's going on. Then somebody told me about Zebra, I think it's called, where you can put in the information and it checks all the different insurance companies, comes back with all the different ones, Progressive and all the other ones. I did that. None of them would give an offer. So I called one to talk to a real person. They says, oh, yeah, we can't insure you right now. I said, why is that? Because you're in a high-risk area. Because of the storms that have been coming, there's a lot of fraud. I never heard of that before in all my life, doing insurance. I could see if I was down in Louisiana or where you are because of the storms that come. But up here in Massachusetts?
Yeah, that is weird. That is, I mean, my car insurance here went up about 20%. So, because we did put in a claim. Hey, Tom, thanks for the questions. Always like talking to you.
Week. Good talking
you as well. All right, take care. Well, like all celebrities, sometimes they're not always right on time. But with us is Brian Lohnes, and Brian, good morning.
Hey, John, my reaction time, if we're going to talk drag racing, I totally was late on the lights here. I apologize.
Well, first off, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do, because every time I turn around, you're doing something new.
Yeah, so Brian Lohnes, I'm the lead play-by-play broadcaster for Fox Sports 1 for the NHRA Drag Racing Series. I also host a couple of podcasts, one for Hot Rod Magazine. I do another podcast for the NHRA, and editor-in-chief of Bankshift.com, which is an automotive car magazine. So I do car stuff. That's what I just tell people. I do car stuff.
And you are actually truly famous now.
I mean, listen, I think if you have to qualify it, you're not. No, it's great. It's, being able to be a part of the FS1 crew that broadcasts the race is pretty much a lifelong dream. I grew up loving drag racing, and to be the guy that's on the other side of the screen on the television now is a pretty wild thing, having grown up watching it my whole life.
And it really, I mean, it is something, and drag racing, and there was a big deal this weekend. Bobby Tasco, set a world record, right?
Yes, so there was an event down in Bradenton, Florida, which is it was a preseason race, big money purse put up, and Bob Tasca went 341 miles an hour in 1,000 feet. Now, funny cars and top fuel dragsters now, they do not race the full quarter mile because of the speeds. They've actually backed the finish line to 1,000 feet, and it's been a bit of a race to get to that 340 mile an hour barrier. We almost got there in 2017. Then the rules were changed to slow the cars down some. And at the end of last season, Bob came close a couple times, and people were kind of wondering if it would happen. And, of course, it did. And it was an amazing run. He ran 339 miles an hour on Friday night. And then on Saturday night, he went 341, which was it's astonishing. It's, in an era where, we don't talk as much about the records like we did back in the 90s with Kenny Bernstein and stuff. Something like this is an incredible feat.
Yeah, it really is, and the idea, like you said, you're doing it at 1,000 feet instead of 1,200 feet, or whatever a quarter of a mile is. It is 1,320 feet, right? Is that a quarter of a mile?
A quarter mile. So, like our pro stock category, which are gasoline burning cars, that run about 200, and the motorcycles, they both run to the quarter mile still.
Yeah.
The top fuel dragsters and the nitro funny cars, and these things, people, they kind of roll their eyes, but it's the truth that they make about 11,000 horsepower out of a 500 cubic inch engine. And they do that because of the nitromethane fuel they use and how much of it they use. And, to give perspective, like Bob's Mustang will accelerate from 0 to 100 in 60 feet. So from a standing start, just within the first 60 feet of the run, the car is already traveling 100 miles an hour. They're astonishing things to watch.
And I remember talking to him. He says it's something like, 8 G's going up and 10 G's coming down. You're almost to the point where you'd pass out.
It's getting to the point. These runs, and what's really interesting about the way these cars work. So when the driver first hits the gas, you think, well, that's where he experiences the most G-force. But the reality is it's not. So when he first hits the gas, Bob will experience about 4 to 4.5 G's. But as the car goes down the racetrack and the clutch becomes a locked unit, whereas the clutch kind of slips so you don't spin the tires, and then into the run the clutch will lock up. So at that point the engine and the rear end are basically spinning at the same speed. When that moment occurs, the G-forces will spike up over 6. So if you can picture it, the car is actually accelerating harder at 800 feet than it is in the first 100 feet of the run. It's just it's a very crazy physics experiment. That's really what drag racing is, right? It's moving this load of a funny car is about 2,500 pounds. How quickly can we move this load of 2,500 pounds from a standing start to 1,000 feet? And thankfully, we keep getting better at it because it keeps me employed.
There you go. I remember talking to Don Gallitz, 15 years ago, and I said to him, do you ever think we'll hit 300 miles an hour? And he kind of looked at me and said, no one thought I could hit 200 miles an hour when I did that. And he said, maybe someday, but he said, I don't know. Back then he's like, I don't think we'll be able to do it. I think aerodynamics and engine performance, I don't think it's going to get there. And the idea that not really that many years later, 341 miles an hour is nuts.
Oh, it is. And the one thing, and drag racers for a really long time, especially back in the 60s, always took pride in this idea that, the scientists said you couldn't go any faster than 180 in a quarter mile. And of course, Garlitz goes in 1964 at Island Dragway in New Jersey. Garlitz goes 200. Some say Chris Karamessinas did it in 1960. There's a big debate for the history of the sport there. But the benefit that we have in hindsight is being able to look and say, okay, well, Garlitz probably mentioned aerodynamics. And the one thing that's always a moving target is, and drag racing is aerodynamics. So, the body that's on Bob Tasca's car certainly does not have the 100% factory appearance of a Ford Mustang, but it is designed by the engineers at Ford. The neat thing about funny car racing is that you have all 4 major manufacturers in there. You got Ford, Chevrolet, Dodge, and Toyota, and all 4 of them have had their own engineering departments design the bodies on those cars. So they are designed by the same people that are designing the aerodynamics on the Corvette, or that are designing the aerodynamics on the Dark Horse Mustang. Those are the same guys building funny car bodies, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it really is. And there's is there anything that's going to come out of, drag racing that's going to end up in a street car? Probably not, but maybe a little aerodynamic tweak might come out of somewhere. But, anything that explodes, and I mean that in a good way, inside, not the engine exploding, but the idea of how combustion happens, always sort of makes me happy. I think someday we'll see a lot more electric drag racers, but I like the idea of stuff that makes a lot of noise and smells like nitromethane and is sort of fun. But I also kind of like the old school drag racing too. I like the idea of stuff with a clutch still, like a real clutch with a pedal.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of good points you brought up there. The first one is, eventually, and we do have a pretty significant EV presence already that's come into the sport on like the sportsman level. We actually have a national championship for EVs now in the NHRA. But one of the things that will eventually be OE technology that you'll see in drag racing is battery technology, and we start to see a little bit already. Both Ford and Chevrolet have dedicated electric drag cars that they have built for exhibition and R&D purposes. So one of the things they work on is the rapid, not depletion. They're working with these cars to figure out how most efficiently they can extract the quickest electrical burst out of these batteries. So, believe it or not, they're actually a pretty valuable R&D tool for the manufacturers, and they test a lot of different controllers and different products in there to figure out, really it's power management, torque management, that type of thing. So it's kind of neat to see that there is still an OE connection there, albeit much more on the EV side. And yeah, I mean, the reason that Top Fuel dragsters and nitro funny cars don't use a transmission and only have a 6-disc clutch and not a torque converter is because there's nothing currently that exists in the world that would survive what happens to it when they hit the gas.
that really is true. I mean, the idea that you said 11,000 horsepower or something.
Yeah, and the torque number, several years ago, a company in France that makes very strong strain gauge measuring equipment that's used in like industrial industries and mining approached Don Schumacher Racing, and they said, hey, let us put one of our gauges on the output shaft of the clutch that's attached to the rear end, and we can see what kind of power this thing's making. And I believe the torque number was around 18,000, and the horsepower extrapolation was 11,000. I mean, it's just it's incredible.
Yeah, that is really crazy. As an announcer and a fan, which you're both, do you have a certain, do you like Top Fuel? Do you like alcohol? Do you like the bikes? Do you like everything? I am fascinated by the motorcycles.
I love all of it, and but I will say this: I will say if I was ever forced to make a signed confession in front of authorities, I would admit that Top Fuel is my favorite category. That said, the motorcycles were a class that I had way too little appreciation of before I got, really in with NHRA about 2014 and dove really head first. And they're mechanical wonders, and they maintain a much closer factory resemblance to really any other category we have. So, you have Hayabusas out there for the Suzukis, you have Buells, are the V-twin bikes, and these things weigh about 650 pounds. They have naturally aspirated engines. They run on gasoline. You can run a V-twin style engine, or you can run a Suzuki inline 4, and they will go 0 to 210 miles an hour in 6 seconds, and with the rider hanging on for dear life. I find it very interesting because so many new fans gravitate to the motorcycles because you can physically see the person on it. It is a very compelling thing to watch.
Yeah, it really is, and some of the riders seem amazing. Like you said, you're holding on for dear life. That is if you've ever been on a fast motorcycle and just nailed the throttle and went, holy crap, that's fast. These are ridiculous.
Yeah, they really are. They make about 400 horsepower, and they will accelerate, through the first 60 feet of the racetrack in about 1 second. So they will accelerate on one tire with a guy or a girl hanging on to the handlebars as fast as somebody strapped into a full-size Pro Stock car with a 500 cubic inch engine. And I guess that's the other thing that's really compelling about the motorcycles is we have so many talented female riders in that category that a couple of them will definitely be vying for a championship this year. But it's like, and that's up and down the sport. I mean, that's one of the things that makes drag racing different, and what's always made it cool to me is that, when you go to a drag race and you look at the competitors, it's not just a bunch of, young, rich white kids that are in stock cars. Because that's kind of what NASCAR has turned into. I mean, we got people from all walks of life. We got men and women. We got people from minority backgrounds. It's a pretty awesome cross section of the world when you actually look at the competitors at a drag race. I mean, Eric Enders won her 6th Pro Stock championship last year. She's starting to close in on Bob Galindo at 10. It's wild.
Yeah, it really is, and you kind of look at all of that and you think, where's it going to go? But is there? It seems like back in definitely the 60s and 70s and maybe even up into the late 80s, there was more personalities. Maybe are there still crazy personalities in drag racing? I mean, John Force still, of course, but is there? There was, like you said, Don Prudhomme, and it seemed like there was people that raced as much on their personalities as in their cars. Is that still happen?
Oh, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think here's the main difference. The main difference is, and this takes nothing away from Don Garlits, who is my ultimate drag racing hero, idol of all time, or Don Prudhomme, who is one of the coolest people who's ever lived, and again, iconic status with Garlits. But the reason that Don Garlits and Shirley Muldowney and Don Prudhomme achieved the level of knowledge and immortality they got was twofold. One was because they match race constantly, so they almost like a vaudeville circuit. Like they would be running 3 or 4 nights a week, and so it's like a candidate on a campaign, right? You stop at every small town, you stop at every medium-sized city, you shake as many hands, and eventually you build up a base of people that love you. You have that aspect, and then the second aspect was the only way you really heard about drag racing for the first 30 or 40 years of its existence was, A, Wide World of Sports that would show it 4 or 5 times a year and typically profile Garlits, Prudhomme, and Muldowney, or the car magazines you got once a month that would show the big national meets, of which there are a handful, that were typically won by Garlits, Muldowney, or Prudhomme, or those similar names. So you had a very high concentration. Like the media was very concentrated, and it was concentrated on a couple of names. So today we have way more means of hearing about these people. So it's definitely a more diluted pool. But Matt Hagan's this giant, huge guy. He races funny cars. He's as big a personality as anybody that's ever been out there. And Austin Prock, who's moving into funny car this year because Robert Height's sitting out. He actually won that big race that Tasca won 341 at, another big personality guy. And so, yeah, they're still there. It's just the way people are consuming those personalities is different.
And didn't Matt Hagan get married? Not to sound like we're talking about Taylor Swift here, but didn't Matt Hagan get married?
I think he's got a long-term relationship going on. I don't know if he and Chloe have tied the knot yet, but I know that they're inseparable.
Yeah. So, which you see them together a lot. So, but yeah. I mean, I had him on my program once. He it was kind of funny. We talked about Tasca being a vegan and him going out and raising his own cows. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and listen, he, we race at Epping every year in the NHRA. We come up to New England Dragway in the summer, late May, early June this year, and Matt has won that race 4 times now. He's like the king of New England Dragway. Tasca won the race in 2023, but he won the Epping race in Bristol because we had such a horrible weather weekend. We rained the whole darn thing out.
It's New England. It's it happens, and I think doesn't Tasca own a little piece of the Dragway up in New Hampshire?
I think he's a shareholder. New England Dragway is owned by a collection of shareholders, and so there's about 800 or 900 of them total. And some guys have a bunch of shares, some guys have one, but I do believe Bob is a shareholder at the track.
Yeah. No, why I said something about you as a celebrity? I was watching the Motor Trend podcast, and Jeff Lutz was on there, and people know.
Sure.
Jeff Lutz from Prep Kings and Street Outlaws and all that sort of stuff, and probably didn't really realize his real racing background. But he kind of looked at you like, you're famous, and I'm kind of looking at him like he's famous, And it was sort of interesting, and the idea that you took him back to the time where he was a bricklayer, I thought was.
and to me, I think it's cool. Like I first met Jeff in like 2006 on Drag Week, and he was on his way up, his career, and I think I was taking the first steps to come up in my career. And I think, to me, there's those people in your lives, them too. Like there are people that you meet along the way, and your lives kind of parallel each other, right? And so I feel like, with Jeff and I have been on kind of that same path. Now, granted, we both stayed in drag racing. He went to a different format than I did, but we've kept in touch all those years, and it was really fun to sit down there with him and just reminisce. And yeah, I mean, this guy was out there laying bricks, and then he goes on to, he starts welding on some cars at his house and becomes a chassis builder. And, next thing you know, the guy's he's made a very nice life for himself in the sport, and he's done it the right way. He's a very quality guy.
Yeah, he really seems like he is. And there is, like you pointed out, there's so many ways to learn about racing or cars in general, whether it's watching some of the Motor Trend stuff with Freiberger and Finnegan, or there's been some changes on those channels a little bit with different hosts and stuff. Yeah. But you can learn some stuff, and you can find it relatively easily now. And the idea that something like Car and Driver now is going to be in every other month magazine, I used to look forward to Hot Rod magazine coming in the mail every month.
Yeah, and look, the print, the physical print magazine side of things is very difficult, and we're not far off when the every other month thing just becomes all digital. In my mind, I don't know anything, but let's just look at the trend, right? It's not like we're going to wake up next Monday and everyone's going to say, you know what? Yes, by all means, make 52 issues a year again. But I do think, I look back and, being a kid and when I was growing up in the 80s or whatever, and it's like, the car magazines are great. It was the best thing we had. You'd pop them open, you'd read, whether it was the buff books to read about the new cars, or it was the greasy-handed books to read about how to, change a camshaft in your small block Chevy. But like today, I look at, what my sons have access to, and I would have much rather been able to watch a guy do it on YouTube than to look at still photos in a magazine. It's like, here's how you swap a camshaft. Here's 4 photos to get the job done. It's like, well, wait a second. What happens between photos 2 and 3? Because we started with a full motor, and now the guy's holding a cam. Yeah.
yeah. It really is, and it's. I'll watch stuff like Vice Grip Garage, for instance, because I like the idea.
Great.
I like the idea because he's basically first off rescuing stuff that's been out in the field forever, but the idea that he's doing some little things to it to make it workable, or get something home and doesn't put puts real people money into it, not crazy unlimited expense kind of money. And I think there's a few shows that sort of do that, and some looking at that's kind of fun. I mean, looking at Mike Finnegan's drag boat, it's like, who can afford to put that together? But it doesn't take away from him. I think he's phenomenal. Yeah, he does a great job on this.
But you're right, having that range, like having the range of the Derek Beery at Vice Grip, who's doing it on a budget you and I can afford, and then who doesn't like to see something ridiculous that's like, you could never have it, but damn, you're happy somebody else put it together.
Absolutely.
I talked to Mike a couple of years ago about that boat, and he's like, "You can go for a ride anytime you want." I was like, "I will never in my life get in that thing." I mean, it looked dangerous sitting still on the floor at SEMA when I saw it the first time, let alone floating. I said, "No way, no way."
Yeah, it really does, and it's it's interesting to see how all things are changing a little bit. And I've become, it almost sounds creepy, but I've become kind of a fan of Riley Schlick. She's Riley rebuilds the Endelbrock carburetors.
Oh, yeah.
And she's got a deal now with Hemmings, and they're doing some video with her because she did really well on All Girls Garage. She was a guest there, and the idea, here's this 18-year-old now first year in college who's rebuilding carburetors as a business, but also rebuilding a couple of cars. And it's fascinating. And to see her, somebody took a picture of her, and I think it might have been her dad, took a picture of her out at, PRI, the Performance Racing? Yeah. And she was standing there talking with Mike Finnegan and absolutely looked amazed that she's like, I got to this point. And the idea that you can do that, and you can do that sort of on your own with a little bit of social media knowledge in the background, I think is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and look, I think, one of the things that's been a constant over the last several years, it's like there's been this drumbeat of the kids don't like cars anymore drumbeat. And I never once heard a kid tell me they didn't like cars. I only heard old people telling me that kids don't like cars anymore. And, Riley is kind of proof positive that that theory is garbage, because if kids didn't like cars, none of the media celebrities you see on YouTube would have millions of followers and have dedicated, like, I do an event every year with Cletus McFarland. He's got one of the largest automotive YouTube followings. So I do his event. I announce his event in Indianapolis each May. And they'll put 15,000 people a day into Indianapolis Raceway Park. The vast majority of them are, like the old days, are kids dragging their parents to the racetrack. Everybody has a blast. But these kids will stand in line for hours and hours on end to meet him and to meet the other people involved. And they love the cars, and the cars are as much a character as anything else. The idea that kids do not necessarily love 69 Camaros the same ways that you and I love 69 Camaros is 100% accurate, because they don't care about 69 Camaros because they were born 40 years after that car was built. It would be like you and I caring about a brass era car, which I do love and appreciate, but I've never woken up in the morning being like, man, I cannot wait to get my hands on a 1918 Buick. I just can't wait to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, before we let you go, your podcast, the one that you started a while back, that is the most historical automotive and mostly automotive podcast. Are you still doing that pretty regularly?
I am. Yeah, it's called the Dorkomotive Podcast, and it is a whole. It's all like mechanical history, mostly automotive. One of the most popular episodes I ever did was the history of the Ferris wheel, which it seems like it would be a very dry topic, but as it turns out, it's like a really amazing story about this first Ferris wheel that was almost 300 feet tall and carried 2,000 people at once, and it's a truly cool story, and there's really something in there for everybody, whether you love drag racing or stock car racing. I got Formula One history in there, and that is the Dorkomotive Podcast. You can get it wherever you want. And like everybody else, John, I am also doing YouTube history videos, so you can find me on YouTube under my own name.
Yeah, and I think one of the episodes I liked, and I may have it wrong, and there's always been, people have used the term hitman in, whether it was Tommy Hitman Hearns, as the boxer. But apparently there was a hitman that drove a race car, right?
Yeah, so there's a guy named Broadway Freddie Dename. His real last name was Dinome, Dinome, and he was a part of Roy DeMeo's gang in New York City during the 1970s. And, a lot of people may have heard about the Gemini twins. They were twin brothers. But they were all part of this gang, and they were mafia murderers. And Broadway Freddie Dename owned a couple of funny cars, which he drove very poorly, but he was involved in the murder of over 150 people. And he ended up turning state's evidence in the 80s, and as you can imagine, did not meet the happiest of ends. But there is an episode called the Mafia Killer Who Loved Funny Cars, and it's the story of Broadway Freddie as told by people who raced with him and who knew him. So it is, to me, that's one of my favorites too. Yeah,
it really is. Hey, Brian, I want to thank you for taking a little time out of your Sunday and joining us on the Car Doctor program. And maybe someday if you happen to run into Derek or Mike or Finnegan, Freiberger, tell them to, maybe they'd like to come on this radio show.
I'll send them your way, and I'll make sure they show up on time, unlike me.
All right. Thanks, man. All right.
Thanks, John.
Take care. Bye-bye. That was Brian Lohnes. You heard his resume. NHRA announcer for Fox Sports, Hot Rod Podcast, his own podcast, the Bank Shift magazine of sorts. It's but check it out. Bank Shift is a lot of great stuff on there. So it's amazing how much detail he knows about all of this. It's just. It scares me how good he is. Hey, why don't we take a break, pay some bills? My name's John Paul. We're way behind our break, so we'll probably have to take another one real quick after this. But let's take a break right now, and if you want to join us, you can actually send us a text message, too, at 781-837-4900. 781-837-4900 is the call-in number. But if you're shy and you want to send a text message, you can send it to the same phone number, 781-837-4900. Let's see if it works. Send us a text. Let's see what happens. My name is John Paul. This is the Car Doctor program on 95.9 WATD.
AAA is with you at every moment in your life. They have 24-hour 7 roadside assistance, which covers you in any car you're driving or riding in, even a rental or your friend's wheels. They have great member rates on home and auto insurance, savings on travel, hotels, and rental cars, and discounts on hundreds of your favorite brands. You're covered on and off the road. Learn more at aaa.com/join.
One Stop Painting and Renovating.
Since 1986, One Stop Painting has been true to its name. The one stop you need to make for all your interior and exterior painting needs. That's 1986, 38 years. Some of our customers today weren't even born when we were painting their moms and dads' homes. And painting isn't all we do. Sure, we can freshen up your house and add some new colors and washable finishes to the walls, but we can also do carpentry, such as adding crown molding or wainscoting, wall and plaster repairs, fix water and smoke damage. We can even help with insurance claims. For nearly 4 decades, we've taken on all projects, large and small, commercial and residential, and given you the same one-stop attention to detail no matter the size or price of the job. We are a family-run company responsible for over 30 employees. Your business helps us take care of their families while our employees take care of yours. Help keep them busy throughout the winter by taking advantage of some of our big seasonal discounts. Call us at 508-888-3500 or check us out online at onestoppainting.com.
One Stop Painting and Renovating.
Hi, this is Liz Lohnes. Tune into Twilight Showcase Radio, hosted by Sandy Stride and Keith James. Visit twilightshowcase.org.
Twilight Showcase, tonight from 8 to 10 on 95.9 WATD. Make an appointment Sunday morning at 11 for John Paul, the Car Doctor, on 95.9 WATD. Now, back to the Car Doctor.
And welcome back to the Car Doctor program on 95.9 WATD. I don't know if I just got tired. I almost said the wrong station ID number thing. Oop. I would have gotten all kinds of trouble. But yeah, you know where you're listening to. So, it's kind of fun to catch up with Brian. I've known him for probably 10 years now. When he first started, I met him when he first started Bank Shift. Or maybe he had it for a while, but I first heard about it probably 10 or more years ago. And even one of his sons was doing a little bit of YouTube stuff too. So you can find out a lot of good information. And I like it when he also does some of the historical drag racing stuff, which is kind of fun to watch too. I said something about a battery tester earlier, and at home, the other home, I have a battery tester. I have a it's the one we use at AAA. It's called a B2Q, and it's a little small. It's a little tiny thing. It's the size of I don't know. It's 2 by 2 inches, maybe, a little small thing. And how it works is you connect it to your phone via Bluetooth, and you look for a barcode or QR code on the battery. You put it into your phone. It connects to the device, and it tests the battery based on that QR code. If that doesn't work, sometimes you can scan the vehicle ID on the car, so you get the accurate what the battery is. It's supposed to be in there, and it is 100% dead accurate. It just does a really nice job of telling you the condition of the battery. Is there parasitic drain? You can do some starting and charging tests with it. It's this amazing little device. The problem is this amazing little device is about $450 that I'm only going to buy once. So the internet being the internet, and Jesse, do you agree that your computer or your phone is always listening to you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I kind of was searching around for affordable battery testers, and there's a bunch out there. You can buy a bunch. And the sad part is I probably gave 2 of them away when we moved from our house in Abington. I gave them to the local Votech school. One was one of these ones that actually puts a load on the battery by heating up. Basically, it looks something that looks like an electric coil. It glows bright red, and you can look at the battery and see how it drops off. I used one of those for years. Never really lied to me. It worked well. And then I had a different style one. I liked that. That was a Midtronics one. It worked really well. I gave them both to the Votech school because I said, why do I need more than one? Well, as I came down here, I kind of did need more. One of my neighbors said he had to go jump start his car, and he's like, I got to go get my battery tested. And one of my other neighbors, and I'm like, I have a car. We leave here. My car is a 2018. The average life of a battery in New England is 5 years. The average life of a battery in hot weather is 2 or 3 years. I'm like, I probably ought to test it and see how it's doing. So the internet, being the internet, heard me, and a company called Topdon, Topdon, which I had never heard of before, started just showing up in my life. And I said to them, I'm interested in testing a battery tester. And they said, well, we have this OBD2 computer tester. And I said, well, I'm really interested in testing a battery tester. So they actually sent me one. And it is about $70, I think, somewhere $60, $70, something like that. And so far, I've tested about 5 batteries with it. And so far, it's been pretty impressive. Accuracy seems good. Voltage is good. It measures impedance through the battery cells. So far, so good. It's I tested the battery in my car, which tested fine. I tested the battery in my wife's car, which was new last year. It's an AGM style battery. Actually, the battery in my car is an AGM battery. I'm not quite sure why. I tested my neighbor's battery, which is a older battery. That's the one we had a jump start. It tested out pretty well. And I tested the battery in my little boat, which hasn't gone anywhere because the weather's not been good. So I wanted to see how that did. And it actually has ratings for cold cranking amps, which is kind of a phony baloney rating, EN, which is another way, SAE is another rating, and something I frankly didn't know existed, a marine rating. Because at first when I tested the battery in the boat, it said 1,000 amps M. And I'm like, I wonder what that means. Well, apparently that's a marine rating. I didn't know there was going to work on boats. I didn't know that. So I actually scrolled through it, and when I first tested it under the normal CCA rating, it came up charged battery, good battery charge, and it's low on charge. So I hooked it up to a battery charger, and it didn't seem to need to be charged. And I retested it using the right parameters, and it tested out fine. So far, this little battery tester is pretty impressive. One thing it doesn't do that the B2Q battery does, which we need far more often, is battery testing needs to be compensated for temperature. High and low temperature can change the way a battery will test. The tester needs to have a thermistor thing that can measure temperature at the battery, and it will adjust the readings for that. This little one doesn't have that, so it's not going to be as accurate in really cold or really hot weather, but it's still going to give you a pretty good idea. So far, so good. I'm going to do some more testing with it. I'm going to find some bad batteries to test and see how they test out for that. So going to check a few things. Let's talk to Ken in Topsfield. Let's find out what's up with him, and then we'll take another break. Ken, good morning.
Good morning, John Paul. Before I ask you my question, what was the name of the outfit for that battery tester?
Topdon, Topdon. And to be frank with you, I've never heard of it before. But it is one of those things, and they have scan tools, they have a variety of electronic things, but this little battery tester came in a little blister pack, and it does have the ability, similar to the expensive battery tester, you can Bluetooth it to your phone, and you could do all the functions on your phone, making it control the tester. I haven't tried that yet because the tester is pretty easy to use. I judge everything on whether I need to read the directions.
Well, I appreciate knowing that.
If I hook it up and I can get it to work without reading the directions, I figure it's pretty easy to use. If I have to read the directions, which apparently I did because it was a marine setting. But other than that, it was simple and easy to use and quick, and took a minute to test the battery. It's pretty easy.
That's great. I'm driving a car out to Montana in another 10 days, and I wanted to have the battery tested. I went to the interstate in Woburn, and they have a center, and the guy came out and put I was determined I needed a battery just in my head.
Yep.
And he came out and he put a tester on, but what you mentioned he did, he put some machine on. I'm not all that good at this. And then on his phone, it showed up the results.
Oh, yeah, yep. Same idea.
And he said the battery was fine. It was really amazing in my mind, but I took his word. He didn't try. He says, you really don't need a new battery. I said, great.
Good
Thank
news.
you for that. Yeah, it is. Always, anytime you can save a shekel, it's always good.
Or in the case of batteries today, $200 to $300.
Yeah, right.
It's a lot of shekels. It's a lot of shekels.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, big set. My question is, cars in the old days as we know it, 20,000, you might get new plugs or something. Nowadays they go, I don't know how long. I asked on a car that I'm driving out with 145,000 if I should get the plug. This is on a CRV in 09 with 145, and my independent mechanic says, I take them out of cars, and they don't even look that bad, and the only thing you do is if you put them in, they cost about $25 each, he says, and you throw it in, and bingo. But he says, I don't even know, if I said, would the mileage improve? He says, he can't say, depends on your drive. So I wanted to hear you talk about spark plugs.
Typically on that CRV, they should have been done at 105,000. That's where they're supposed to be.
Right.
Maybe they were done then, or somewhere near.
No,
they weren't.
No, because
okay.
I know I happen to know the history of the car, and they weren't. So they've never been done in my mind. I know enough about this, so that wouldn't be a bad thing to do, would it?
No, because chances are the plugs, the gap has grown a little bit. Driving up and down hills when you're putting a little more stress on everything, having a spark plug that's going to fire properly, at 150,000, I would say spend the money. I think it's going to be money well spent.
Thank you. And one last thing, it isn't like you get wires and all this new stuff. These newer cars in the last 20 years or so, some things aren't the same. Do cars still have wires, some of these new? I don't know.
Some do. Some still do. Some have what's called coil on plug, where the ignition coil sits right on the spark plug, and they don't really have a spark plug wire per se. They have more of a more of a. It looks like a terminal that just goes from the coil down to it. Pretty kind of simple looking thing. Your car has is a little bit, I guess in one way it's a little bit similar to that. It's it uses coils that go directly onto the plug, so no real wires. There's just these ignition coil sleeves, and in your car it's there's a cover you take off. You pull off the coils, and you take the spark plugs out and put the new ones in. So no wires to speak of. So you would just do that. You would just do that, and you should be in pretty good shape. So
anything else you'd recommend at this point? Like if you're going to do the plugs, is there the plugs? Anything else you might want to just I know the air clean is good, but is there something you would recommend?
I would, where the car is 14 years old, is that, or 12 years old? Is that my math? Yeah, 12 years old.
That's old.
I would definitely take a good look at the fan belt, the drive belt, make sure it's not cracked or glazed or anything. And, give the radiator hoses a good look, because, even though we're seeing hoses that last, 10, 12,000 miles, 10, 12 years, I would just give them a good look. The good thing is on your vehicle, it's got a timing chain, not a timing belt, so you don't have to worry about that. But I would just give a good, little checkup all the way around just to make sure it's doing okay, and, double check the tires, put the right amount of air in them, get yourself a snack and go for a ride.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
I appreciate your good advice.
All right. Take care, Ken. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Why don't we take that other break now? My name's John Paul. This is the Car Doctor program. And send us a text message at 781-837-4900. Let's see if it works. First.
AAA is with you at every moment in your life. They have 24-hour 7 roadside assistance, which covers you in any car you're driving or riding in, even a rental or your friend's wheels. They have great member rates on home and auto insurance, savings on travel, hotels, and rental cars, and discounts on hundreds of your favorite brands. You're covered on and off the road. Learn more at aaa.com/join.
This is a message from the Hull Life Saving Museum. On Thursday, February 22nd at 7 p.m., the Hull Life Saving Museum is hosting a lecture by Adrienne Murphy, president of the South Shore Neptunes, one of the oldest scuba dive clubs in the U.S. Learn about their special activities from local beach dives to Caribbean adventures. For more information, go to hulllifesavingmuseum.org.
Talk radio with a South Shore point of view. Hi, I'm Kevin Tachi. Join me tomorrow for Monday Night Talk, where the South Shore comes to talk. Tomorrow night after the 6 o'clock news here on 95.9 WATD.
Make an appointment Sunday morning at 11 for John Paul, the Car Doctor, on 95.9 WATD. Now, back to the Car Doctor.
And welcome back. And Chris from Marshfield sent us a picture of a Corvette and apparently said it's his dream car. And, well, now we know the text line works. So there you go.
It wasn't Marshfield, it was Marsh Vegas.
I was trying to be polite. And I don't know if you said that on the air or not. So
I did. Yeah, it's a much more elite, hardcore partying, gambling side of town.
Oh, so that's down by the water? Is that where?
Mm-hmm. I think Brant Rock actually used to have a casino, didn't it?
I think it very well could be. I've the only place I've ever went really in Marshfield is there used to be Bill Bailey used to own the Bailey, an Irish pub in Marshfield, and I knew Bill from radio and went down there and did a live remote down there, and apparently I was caught drinking a beer at 10 in the morning. It was a Guinness, so it was like breakfast. So
it's an Irish pub, you know.
Yeah, it is. So
crime if you weren't.
That's the way I looked at it. Somebody actually emailed me this week and said they heard me on a Maine radio station. Yes, they did. And they also wanted to know about the Volkswagen ID Buzz van. Will it really ever show up? It was just at the Chicago Auto Show. They said the end of 2024, but they've expect demand to exceed supply. And so it'll be interesting to see where that price is out at. Also, they're not taking reservations. So, like, Tesla's been, takes reservation for everything. And Volkswagen's not going to do that. Volkswagen says we don't want to disappoint people by taking a $100 reservation and saying you'll get your car in 3 years. So when it's out, it's out. You just go to your local Volkswagen dealer and go buy one. It is the ID Buzz is like the all new electric Volkswagen hippie minivan, and the person I was on the show with said, I believe her comment was, "Get your hippie vibe going and go buy one." So there you go. Hey, that music means we need to go. I want to thank Brian Lohnes for calling in. I want to thank our regular callers for calling in. Of course, Jesse for doing everything he does on the board and keeping everything all in one piece. So until next week. Make sure you wear your seatbelt, drive safely, be good to your car, and if you see an emergency vehicle by the side of the road, slow down or move over. It saves lives. Talk to you all next week. Bye-bye.